Hello everyone and welcome back to another Strategoi video. We're back with some Lumineth content and we've heard your guys' pleas for a ally choice video. So here we are. I brought the two guys best known for all the ally knowledge in the AOS universe, namely Ryan, my regular co-host, and Siegfried, who you might have heard during our review of the Lumineth Battletome. And if you're in our Discord, there is really no way you don't know who Siegfried is. So welcome to both of you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I feel like we could do a even longer coverage of especially the Stormcast options than we're going to do, but this is a nice whetting the appetite, I think.
Yeah. So for this video specifically, as Ryan mentioned, we kind of went with the approach of choosing which units are our top picks rather than going over all of the units. Imagine going over all of the units of the Stormcast roster, the Sylvaneth roster, the Daughters of Khaine roster, and the IDK roster. Then we'd be here for at least half a day, I think. But yeah, for this video, we're going to go over all the general rules for allies first. Then we'll talk about why you would bring out allies for Lumineth Realmlord specifically. Then we'll go over our top picks and we'll end on a conclusion as usual. Anything you guys want to bring up before we get into it? Ryan or Siegfried?
Well, I'm glad to be here once again and be of service to the community.
Very happy to have you. Okay, let's dive right in. Right, so for the allies general rules, this slide is actually the same one that we used, Ryan, when we did the IDK allies video. It's been a while, actually, since we did that. But the general rules really haven't changed a lot or at all. So 1 in 4 units can be allies. If you're playing the regular 2k point game, only 400 points of those 2k points can be allies. You can ignore allies when determining your factions. So obviously they don't break your allegiance abilities or your subfaction abilities. They cannot be generals or fill battle line slots. And you cannot give them artifacts, command traits, or it says command traits, but command traits or anything like that. And they can be included in core battalions. Now
Yes.
You want to add something here?
The battle line thing, you can double reinforce them though if the unit you bring is a battle line unit.
Okay.
So it doesn't count as battle line, but it can be double reinforced.
Yeah, that's a good addition. Thank you. Then for Lumineth specific stuff, I had to include this one because in our earlier video where we did the IDK allies video, Lumineth could still buff their own allies with Aether Quartz, for example, but now that's gone. Now it's been keyworded, so if you were one of those players that has been in the game for long enough time where you use that on allies, you can no longer do that. As a kind of apology, I guess, for taking that away, even though they should have from the start. They gave us more options. So whereas we had only Idoneth before, now we have Stormcast, Daughters, and Sylvaneth, which is amazing. Especially the Stormcast roster is such a big roster that it opens up so many possibilities for list building.
Do you guys feel that it's weird that they don't include at least the city's elves?
Yes.
Yes.
Kind of weird. They've got all the other elves here plus Stormcast. So, yeah, I mean, the thing I have noticed though is some of the armies that used to like distinguish between which specific cities units you can bring as allies have been changed to just say cities now. I think KO might be one of them, or not KO. Sylvaneth is one of them, maybe. I don't know. There was one army that used to be that way, and then they just said generically you can take all of them. Maybe it's Idoneth now that I think about it. And maybe they feel like if they were to take all of cities, then you guys would have too many good options for synergy. Because like, who's really taking Wanderers? No one. You guys, what would you take out of cities if you were to take cities? Would it be like Phoenixes and stuff?
Go ahead, Siegfried. I know you want to take this one. I know.
Well, Phoenix Guard will be certainly one one great choice. as the Anointed on Frostheart Phoenix.
Mhm.
But I don't think we're missing that much. I mean, perhaps some cheap screen will be more useful from the
Yeah.
city's roster, or the Drakespawn Knights, which is a cheap unit. It is a cavalry, so it can screen well, and it has a good save. That will be a good option.
Yeah.
Um, Otherwise, yeah, the Phoenix Temple part, it will be the most competitive one.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and I mean the Lord on Griffin might be interesting as well, just as something you can yeet into your opponent's lines and then maybe resurrect them. Or oh no, they wouldn't get that. I think, or would they?
Which part?
Oh no, it's his.
The
You mean
resurrection
with
rule
the
that's in the White Dwarf.
No. That's specific to the cities. That's a mount trait.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Right. Okay. Let's move on. So obviously, when we're making a video about allies, we have to ask ourselves, why would we take allies in Lumineth? Well, if you've been playing Lumineth for a while, or if you've been in our Discord, or if you're just a little bit critical about the content that Games Workshop pushes out, then you might have thought about the first topic here, and that is that it fills gaps in our unit roster. Siegfried and I still feel that the Lumineth book is very incomplete. I don't know whether you would agree with that, Ryan. But the allies do allow us to fill certain gaps that are left now in the roster. Would you agree with that, Ryan?
I mean, obviously, lore-wise, you guys were built for 2 more temples, and I know that that's kind of the running thought in the back of your mind, is that GW has left a hole for some other roles and stuff. I hope you're right. That would be really cool. Yeah, I guess, but you're supposed to be elite anyway, so having your cheapest battle line units being kind of expensive at like what's the cheapest? Is Stone Guard at like what are they at? 130? Yeah. I mean, Idoneth's kind of in that same place too. So it's kind of LV to have not a lot of spam, not a lot of horde potential. So if you're looking for something cheaper, definitely allies would be the easiest way to do that. But what else do you guys feel like you're missing?
Siegfried, I'm going to leave this up to you as well. I'll just add some stuff, but we've talked about this so many times, the two of us.
Right. Well, in general, I believe that allies should fill the gaps, as you said. We are lacking speed. And yes, we have units that are fast, but we don't have units that are fast and punchy or effective. So we lack speed, and we lack some fast hammers. We don't have these. I think it's a huge gap in the army, because yes, we can be faster with the speed of his spell, but it's not the same. And it's a spell, it can be unbound, and if you bring the Enlightener to have it double cast, it's on a 3-up, you just can't build your strategy around it. It's not a command ability which you can give, and almost nothing in the game will prevent you from doing so. So that makes it tricky. And I mean, even with the speed of his, our 6-inch unit, 6-inch movement units will still struggle with just 12 inches and no fly. And even with a spell, it's not that game breaking. And on top of that, one of our 2 main abilities as an army is to activate 2 units. If you can't bring your whole army on the opponent to take advantage of that rule, and you can only send 1 unit that will get the speed of his, or 2 most, to assault the enemy army, we just can't capitalize on one of our strengths. That's my... That's what I think we're missing most dearly. Not as much cheap units, but fast, hard-hitting units.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
and monsters, and some good flying non-unique hero monster.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, our best two hammers are the cows and Altharion, and they're both pretty difficult to get into combat and both very susceptible to mortal wounds. So you're almost always forced to take techless, and I mean you see that in tournament lists, Ryan. You would know this because you're playing one of those lists, but we keep going back to this crux of the Sentinels because that's the part of the game that we participate the best in, and that's mainly because we just have no decent combat phase. It's not that I feel like our combat phase should be the best around, but I just would like to have that option, even if it was just with the sub factions. But that's a whole different conversation, obviously. But the Lumineth sub faction gave us a pre-game move, and that allowed us to, play a bit more aggressively in the combat phase. And now that's also gone. So we're just back to Sentinels or full geometric lists, which are fun but also not very killy. So I do agree, something like Fulminators, or I don't want to spoil all the top picks that we've chosen, but that's something that we miss.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, just playing devil's advocate really quickly. Like, number one, there's no promise that every army in this game is going to be good at everything, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I mean, like, Fire Slayers is a perfect example of that, and yet they're doing pretty well in tournaments decently right now. I mean, like, just not everything's going to be good at everything. So I can see if someone bought any given army and then is frustrated that it doesn't get to do other play styles. That's fair. At least you guys have the promise of 2 new temples coming out.
Yeah.
A lot of armies are never going to see them expand, and if someone can't be happy with what they've got, then they're never going to probably figure out how to find that balance. So that's the first devil's advocate thing. And the second is, how much would you guys end up feeling like you solved by Dawn Riders just being the thing you're asking for? Like, if all that is a war scroll change, right? Like,
Yeah.
if they had made Dawn Riders a hammer, would you guys feel like that's enough?
Mostly for me, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would like some some monster hero. It doesn't have to be the strongest one, but I believe that every army should at least have one monster hero who can take artifacts and command trades. And it's not about power play. It's about options. I mean, whatever list I try to build with Lumineth, it always ends up in some kind of a castle, and that can get boring after an amount of time. I believe that, I mean, the newest battle tomes, Seraphon and Soulblight, I see options. I see different ways to play. And that makes a book interesting, because even if one of those play styles is the best, if the other ones are, in an adequate level, people will still play with those styles and have fun and change things, and don't be pigeonholed, in one certain build.
Yeah, I agree. I think your book is one of the least inspiring books in the 3rd edition. So I would agree with that, as someone who's literally taking them to Worlds. So,
well, you're the best guy to tell us that, because you play a lot of armies, you know a lot about different armies, and now that you've played it, you just know how boring it is to always come back to that obvious strength, right?
Well, correction, I really like the Techless list.
Yeah, Techless is amazing.
I really like it, but I think a healthy book should have, like Siegfried just said, more choices. Now, I think I would just push back and say, like, looking at the new KO book, which is obviously super strong and flexible right now, all they have to do is change the rules with the existing things you guys have, and it could be a night and day shift.
Yep.
You don't have to get new units.
No, I agree.
We're here to talk about allies, so
yeah.
That is kind of like expanding your unit selection. So let's keep going with that.
Yeah, we went on a little bit of a tangent there. So as we mentioned, bringing those allies kind of brings some unique synergies to the game, which makes it very interesting and is also sometimes very surprising to your opponents. There are some picks in the top picks here that I really like for a surprise effect, which I'll mention when it comes up. But certain armies have already picked up on those aspects. Specifically something tied to a Stormcast banner bearer, but we'll get into that later. Okay, so here are our top picks. Obviously, we've got 4 armies to tackle, and we're starting with Sylvaneth. I chose Sylvaneth as the first one because we only have one of our top picks from this army. So that's a bit of a pity, but also, Sylvaneth is just such a specific play style, and their units function so well with their allegiance abilities that it's very hard to find units that mesh well with ours. But 3 Revenants were a pick from me and from you as well, I think, Ryan?
Yes.
Why would you bring these guys?
So, I mean, for the obvious teleport reasons that you've got listed here, but the one of the first questions is why not Shadow Stalkers, Khainite Shadow Stalkers, which used to fill a very similar role from Daughters of Khaine, who can also teleport every turn. It's simply that their price went too high. So tree revs are 2 wounds apiece, 5 models. They can teleport every turn. They've got a reroll on like 1 thing per turn, like a save roll or to hit a wound roll. Like you've said here, they're good at just getting around the table and grabbing objectives and stuff. And in an army, like Siegfried said, that often wants to play in a castle, having another unit that can teleport across the board and go grab some stuff while you're staying in the castle is such a good backup plan.
I think they lost a reroll though. I think it's turned into free all-out attack or all-out defense now.
Oh, is it? Let me double check. But keep going.
Yeah. So it's very cool that they also have a 6-inch pile-in. They're only on a 4+ save, but they have 2 wounds a pop, so it's a 10 wound unit for 110 points. They used to be a lot cheaper and thus more appealing to me personally, but they're still very good at grabbing objectives. They're very easy to take Desecrator Lance, for example, the battle tactic. Bringing one of these units is never a waste, I feel. Siegfried, what do you think about the 3 revs?
I think they're a great unit. They weren't on my picks. Because I believe in the current GHB, there are not many battle plans in which you need to reach that far. So their teleport is not as great as it was in the previous GHB, but I believe that as soon as we get the new one, I believe we may see a change in the battle plans, and then I think they will shine much brighter.
Yeah, so
not that they're a bad choice at the moment, but
no, they used to be much better in season 1, right?
Yeah.
So for you, all of you out there that are just listening and are not very eager to look for the date here, we're at the time of the recording of this video, we're in season 22-23, season 2. So that's a season that's all about Galician champions. The one before that was all about Galician veterans, and I felt like these guys were better then, even though they took more damage. They were actually very good conquerors, with counting as 3 models on an objective.
Yep.
That you're right. Good.
You're right about the command trait. It's once per battle round, all out attack, all out defense. Yeah, they used to have a reroll. I haven't used them since then. As like literally in prepping for Worlds, one of the things we do is go through every single battle plan and every single matchup and think about. We usually rate things on like a this is a good matchup, this is a neutral matchup, or this is a bad matchup or a bad battle plan. I can say at least in my tech list, there are certain battle plans like Jaws of Galat that would be much more favorable for me, even if I could teleport a unit like this over to one of those objectives. I don't know. I agree with Siegfried that it's less powerful than it once was, and some of the missions are pretty centrally located, but a castle doesn't move very fast. So having anything that can get across to even that other objective or like battle lines drawn getting into one of those quarters when you don't want to break up your castle can be a big thing. So if you're not playing castle, then I would agree, probably less of a thing. taking someone's defend what's ours and just cheekily teleporting this unit into the corner at the end of the game can be a big 3-point swing. So I think there's still uses for this kind of thing, but you can do it with a hero that teleports, wink wink, in a similar kind of way and would still be a GC.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, in this season we're probably best off using the cheaper hero that you included in your top picks. But rules change. I love these guys in my Sylvaneth force. I always have them just sitting in the corners. They do nothing for a turn or two, and then they teleport to get me a battle tactic, or I save one for the grand strategy, as you mentioned. Or they're just fine as screens, and that's something that they do better than heroes in all seasons, I imagine. And that's screening. They're cheap enough that you're fine with throwing them out there and screening something for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the daughters. So we have 2 topics for the daughters here, and ironically, I let you guys both decide which were your topics, and you both chose the harpies, but you chose the different versions, which is super interesting to me. So I think Ryan, you went with the Heartrenders, right?
Yeah, so I was just looking through some worlds lists, and a lot of people took life takers, and I'm gonna guess from what Siegfried told us off camera, if you will. That it has more to do with just being able to fit the points in because they're 20 points cheaper.
Yeah.
But as Siegfried was alluding to, these guys, I think the shooting unit does more of what you want it to do because both units get to deep strike and reserve, and they have some kind of movement shenanigan ability. But the Heartrenders, come in outside of 9, then they can shoot, and then after they've shot, they can move. 6 inches? So these can be really great for doing a little bit of damage, putting some stuff in a weird place or tying up your opponents in a way, and then moving back onto an objective strategically and continue doing so throughout the game. The problem is both these units are like paper. I think they're on a 5-up save with 1 wound apiece. Might depend on whether they have shields or not. I forget exactly how the War Scroll's worded now. But they die to a swift breeze. So, the other ones require you to get in combat to be able to use their movement shenanigans. And that's only on a 4-up. So I tend to prefer these guys. But if it's if you can't afford the 20 points, then obviously go with the cheaper ones if you still want that deep strike ability.
Yeah, I love that rule though. The rule that allows them to move after shooting. It's so cool. If you have the 20 points left over, then definitely take the Heartrenders over the Life Takers. Yeah. But if it's just for cheap throwaway units, as you mentioned, they die to anything in the game. Then yeah, maybe not wasting 100 points and instead just wasting 80 points is a little bit of a win, I guess.
Sure.
Now, I just want to point out we've always split these slides into what's on a War Scroll and why we would pick this War Scroll specifically. And you'll notice that in most of our top picks, it's going to say good objective grabbers, lots of movement shenanigans. And that's for 2 reasons mainly. First of all, movement wins games. Second of all, that's something that we're, as a Lumineth player, we're not very good at the movement shenanigans. We have to teleport from Teclis, obviously. But dependable movement shenanigans are not very easy to find in our book. We have no dependable teleports. Certain units that we have, like the Wind Chargers, are quite fast, so the Foxes as well. But then they're also quite expensive. So when we're looking at one of those gaps to fill, as we mentioned before, one of those gaps is cheap screens and or objective grabbers that can teleport in. So that's definitely one of the gaps we fill with these units. Okay, Siegfried, let's move on to your Life Takers. Is it true that you only chose these over the Heartrenders because of the points?
Well, yeah. Heartrenders are for sure better, and they have 20 inches reach with their extra movement, so it gives them quite an edge. And if I were to just include a single unit, I would always choose the Heartrenders. But the point is that you will take at least 2 or 3, depending on how many units you have in your army. Because imagine, we most of the times use Dawn Riders as screens and chaff and all that, and they are 130 points. So with 160 points, you can include 2 units of Life Takers. So it's more for value for money. If you only plan for them to go grab an objective or die as screens and all that, yes, the extra utility of the hard traders is great, but they are more disposable. And for 160 points, you get 2 screens, 2 units. It's if you compare it for value for money for what you get compared to our other usual screens, I think that's where the Life Taker's value is.
Yeah, that's interesting. That it is, as you say, it's pretty close to a unit of Dawn Riders. Only 30 points difference. Yeah, that's a good point. Cool. I did not think about taking 2. I would only ever bring 1, but now that you mention it, if you're just using them as screens, then that would also be fine, I guess.
You can take even 3 if you have enough units.
The thing is, Dawn Riders still...
Not that many points.
Yeah. Dawn Riders still have a chance of surviving, though, which I do not see with these guys.
My big thing with anything that gets a deep strike is like it's deep striking out of 9 and there's no charge bonus. If they gave us a charge bonus on this unit after it deep struck, I'd see a little bit more of an obvious benefit for it. But there's a really good chance that if you use the deep strike and you're not doing it for objectives, that they're just going to be wiped out the next turn.
Yeah.
So whereas the other unit can at least shoot and do something and then move away. But that's interesting about the bodies. I feel like we've got, if we're looking for is bodies per point, I feel like we could probably go through and reevaluate a whole bunch of units that way. But they are definitely a fast unit. So if you're looking for a Dawn Riders or Wind Chargers type build that wants screens that are keeping up with them, I could see that being a thing. Like you keep these guys moving in front of your priority Lumineth units. That could be interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well, the strategy is that if you go first, you deep strike them or you ram them on the face of the opponent and have them act as a roadblock. You go score on the objectives, the opponent will of course wipe them out, but so then if the opponent gets the double turn, you will get hit once before you get to swing back, and then you will have the chance for a double turn. So it acts as a way to pressure your opponent because if he makes you go first, you will do this strategy. If he doesn't, they can still screen if he goes on the offensive. So it's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
At least in my eyes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's already it for Daughters of Khaine. I think there's still plenty of good units that you could take, but they're just not really something that we need in our roster per se. You could take the bow snakes, but then you have sentinels that do their job better for most of the time, especially outside of their own book. So there's really not a lot of roles that they still have to fulfill with allies from the Daughters here.
Yeah, most of what they're doing, like what you said with Sylvaneth, is relying on book buffs or synergy pieces. I could see maybe running a unit or 2 of Witch Elves along with like the Gladiatrix maybe to get some extra punching power.
Yeah.
But that's a combo. That could have been a thing. Maybe I don't know if that fits in the point. I think it does. You take a Gladiatrix and then a 20 block of Witch Elves or Sisters of Slaughter, and then they're pretty fast and could punch pretty hard. So that could be an honorary mention maybe.
Yeah, I actually considered putting that in. So it's funny that you mentioned that. I almost did, but then I was like, if that's a threshold that we're going for, then I have to add in at least 10 different units as well from other books. So.
The problem in the subtext that maybe we should address here and now while we're talking about it is that Lumineth players, from what I understand, are always kind of griping about how hard it is to fit all of your units you want into an army with your points. And so when I was thinking about allies, I was thinking about one unit of something, most often not taking a full 400 points worth of allies, because then it really cuts into your Lumineth. Like, I don't even think you can fulfill battle line requirements with Teclis in the list. Well, you could, but it would have to go like MSU or something cheaper, right? And then also do 400 points of allies. So, yeah, I mean, you would be kind of shoehorned into a type of build just to knock out your battle line and keep Teclis in the list.
Yeah.
But Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like that's a subtext, though, is that you guys are an elite army, that you're not exactly often left with 400 points wondering what you're going to do with it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, now let's get into the juicy stuff. So we're onto our Idoneth page, and we're starting off with one of my favorites, and I know that Siegfried loves this guy as well. Funny story about this guy. I actually traded one of these Eidolons with Ryan a couple of weeks ago, just because I really wanted to have one and just have him around in case I wanted to ally him in. He was also in our first IDK ally video, and he's come down in points since then. I think 35 points cheaper than he was before. And he has the same rules, so it's only gotten better. Now, Seek, I'm mostly interested in why you would take this unit, because I think we have the same ideology here.
Yeah, well, it gives the army something that it doesn't have. It has speed, it's 12 inches with fly. The retreat and charge, the shenanigans you can do with that are limitless. You know, you can charge, then retreat and go hit the back objective of the opponent, go and murder some of his support heroes. The Eidolon is quite defensively capable. You know, it has a 3-up save, 5-up ward. It self-heals when it charges, and it will charge 5 times, most likely, if he lives. It doesn't degrade. It's a totem. It's really self-sufficient. And because it doesn't degrade and it is kind of tough, you can use it and use your 2 units of Lumineth and activate first to take advantage of it, and leave it to activate as the next choice. So I believe it gives much more options, and now that it got even cheaper in points, I think it's a well worth investment.
Yeah, he's a very good hero hunter as well, and as you said, he's just an ally choice that you really don't have to worry about. You sunk a lot of points into him, but he's self-sufficient, as you mentioned. He's a lone agent. He can do his thing and just bugger off, and you play your Lumineth game while he's causing havoc on the sides, maybe. It's also he's not that expensive in the sense that if you throw him in something and he's going to die over 2 turns, that's still usually a good investment depending on what you tied up there. So I do think it's interesting in that regard. He's kind of competing with the Celestin Prime, which will come up in the Stormcast section. He's 80 points cheaper, obviously. The Prime is way more straightforward, I think a bit more tanky as well, but has less movement shenanigans throughout the game. After he's come down from his teleports, he's where he is, and the Eidolon can at least still charge in and keep going, as you mentioned. And he also looks amazing, which I have to say. I mean, this model is one of the best out there.
Agreed.
So yeah, I really like it. Ryan, what do you think about the Eidolon? Because I used it against you in an IDK game that we did, and he got beaten down pretty fast.
Yeah, I mean, I as an Idoneth player, I have mixed feelings about this guy, because he used to be better as a synergy piece. His bubble was bigger, and he impacted more than what he does now with his +1 to wound. You guys aren't using it for that. You're using it as a self-sufficient tool. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I was going to ask you guys if the Water Temple ends up becoming a thing, as it probably should. What if you had someone that was kind of like this? I mean, he almost kind of fits in the vibe already, right? I mean, he kind of looks like he belongs in the Water Temple. I don't know. Do you feel like they would release something like this for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going on the lore itself, I think that's also why Seek and I feel like we were missing certain news. As you mentioned, not every army should be good at every phase or should be able to play in every phase. But if your lore says you should, then you'll always feel like you're missing something. And in the book, they describe the Water Temple as an unstoppable force, like an unstoppable wave. I expect them to do something with axes because that's something that we haven't had before, or maybe pole arms or something. And they always also said that we're getting a big, like, tapir. I don't know what the right pronunciation is here. Monster. Was the right pronunciation, Ryan?
Well, I don't know which word you're trying to say. How do you spell
it? Tapir. Is that not a?
That's like an animal, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sieg, do you know the English word for that? Because I remember Hades using a different word for it, and it's probably the right English term, but I had to look it up what it meant.
Well, I'm not sure myself,
Yeah.
but there are many speculations about what will be the River Temple units or what will be the River Temple spirit. Some people warned elephants.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an elephant
all
icon on
kinds
the
of-
breastplates of the wardens, and all the breastplate pieces are either of runes or are the animal spirits of the temples. So, a cow with big axes or pole arms riding a wave. It could happen. It could happen.
It could happen, yes, for sure.
Yeah, or a hippo, or whatever. Yeah. A hippo is too obvious. They're not going for the obvious choices. But yeah, this would fit into the River Temple 100%. Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's not dwell on every awesome bit of Lumineth lore. So that brings us to the Namarti Reavers. We did not include the Namarti Thralls here, but the Reavers are in there. Sieg, this was one of your choices. I also would have probably picked it. Why don't you go ahead and tell us why you would choose these over Sentinels? Because that's the unit that you're competing with, right?
Yes, correct. I mean, they are better than Sentinels. Outside of Helon, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are superior to Sentinels in almost any way, apart from range, perhaps.
It's a big thing, to be fair.
Yes, of course. But the thing is, in all my latest games in this GHB and in the previous one to an extent, it doesn't take much time for the armies to be close. So unless you are specifically aiming to shoot some support characters that stay in the back of the enemy army, you will most likely sooner rather than later find yourself with foes well within range. And it's not that bad. I mean, they have 18 inches range and they move 8 inches. So 26 inches is not that bad of a range threat, in my opinion. And they are self-sufficient. They are not relying on a spell to do their damage, which is very important, in my opinion. And it's one of the main weaknesses of the Helon build, because even with Teclis, you just have a +1 on the casting roll. So if the opponent manages to unbind one or both of your power of his spells, well, you're in trouble, because the damage output of the Sentinels will plummet really bad. So these guys do not suffer from this, and they also get on 9 inches +1 to hit, which makes them even more killy. They also get it when they unleash Hell. So again, you mitigate the -1 to hit from unleash Hell. And I think they're mobile. You don't have to put them on Shining Company, so they can screen without you thinking that you're shooting your foot or something, that you're missing out on an important ability.
Yeah, they move 8 inches instead of 6 from the Sentinels, but they have shorter range. They're less tanky because they have no -1 to hit, because no Shining Company. I also feel like the way they deal damage is very different from Sentinels, where Sentinels have less shots and every shot is high quality or should be high quality with the 5+2 mortal wound if you got Paraphysion. Whereas these guys, as you mentioned, Siegfried, they don't need buffs, but even without the buffs, I wouldn't necessarily target very tanky units with these. You know, if you're targeting a unit with a 3-up save, increase to a 2-up with all out defense, I'd probably rather go with the Sentinels for that. But they're good at killing screens. They're also good at killing low saved units because their damage is done through volume, not through quality, right?
Yes, and I mean, imagine that with 10 Sentinels, you get 9 shots, and if you have power of his own, you will do 3 mortal wounds. So you're paying 160 points to do 3 mortal wounds in reality. While these guys, they will shoot 21 or 20, I'm not sure if the champion, I don't think the champion, it's 20 shots. On a 3-up, -1 rend, 1 damage, and they can benefit from all-out attack because Sentinels won't benefit much from it, if at all. So it's quantity over quality, but it is more damage. Even versus a 3-up save, they do more damage. On a 2-up save, yes, Sentinels are the best choice. But I mean, we have Blade Lords, we have Wardens, we have ways to do mortal wounds on those tough units. So
that's fair.
It's not that we're lacking in that department.
Ryan, you want to add anything here?
Sieg's right that the champ gets a +1 melee, which is weird.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had to look it up. Usually with archer units, it's the other way around. But anyway, yeah, I could see this being a thing. Jonas, you had said when you played with Reavers in our game that you really enjoyed that play style of that they were more mobile and can kind of get up there and still do some stuff. I guess because I'm an Idoneth player, I think of them in the context of being around a turtle as well. So they can get that extra +1 to hit. And so on an Unleash Hell, they can even be its 2 still, which is pretty crazy. And then running, the problem is they're still pretty expensive though. So running a 20 block of them is eating up a good chunk of your points in Lumineth. And I feel like that's mostly what you see them doing. But no, I think it's a good choice. They're fast. And if you want more mobile, thing that doesn't need to be in Halon, then it's a good option.
Yeah, I think I enjoy these guys mostly because, well, first of all, I like fast armies, but also they play as an archer unit should play. Their shots are low quality, but it's just a hail of arrows, and they move fast because they're not armored. You can use them as scout parts. You can even use them as screens, as Siegfried mentioned. So I feel like they're almost more fitting, even though I really love the idea of sniping magical arrow-wielding sniping units like Sentinels. I also kind of hate it as a historian because it just... it irks me a little bit. And I know it's a silly argument because it's a fantasy game, but I just wish Sentinels were much cheaper, way less damage, and we could invest in something else. And we maybe have something more movable like the Namarti Reavers. Imagine these guys on Helon. That would be so cool.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean the problem with Sentinels, it's not the Sentinels themselves, is the fact that the army lacks in projection of power. So that's the problem. You have a slow army that lacks in projection of power. So many people feel that they have to include Sentinels just to be threatening from afar and get the enemy army to come to our castle,
Yeah. Okay. Next up, the Shark. So this is one that neither of you included, and I left in from the previous presentation we did here on the IDK allies. So I like Alopexes still because they do something that we can't do, and they're fast. They do somewhat reliable damage. It's only 170 points. You can throw them into a unit to keep them still for a while, and there's a very cool synergy with the net launcher because if you hit something with the net launcher, it can't pile in, and our units are famously known for not needing to pile in as much because especially now with the rework on the Blade Lords, they have 2-inch reach. They don't actually need to be in range to get more attacks. And the Wardens, they have 3 inches on their polearm. So imagine running a unit of 20 Wardens into an enemy unit, and that unit cannot pile in. You just tag them with your Wardens so that they're all or most of them are within range. And your opponent won't be able to hit back with most of his stuff while you hit with most of yours. So that's a very cool synergy I see here. The only reason why I wouldn't necessarily say that this is an auto include or something that you always bring is because 170 points could also be 10 Sentinels, for example, and that has, I guess it has somewhat more synergy, especially in Helon once again. But I do still think it's a very cool unit, especially if you're bringing, let's say, Dawn Riders or something. This would also be a very cool alternative. What do you guys think about this one?
Sieg?
Okay. Well, I like the Sharks, but I always compare them with other ally choices that we can do, and the other choices always seem better to me. I mean, I like the net launcher, but if I remember correctly, it's a single attack.
Yeah.
So it's on a 3-up, and if you want it to be, you may have to invest a CP to make sure that's on a 2-up.
Yeah, it's unreliable.
Yes, it's a bit unreliable, and I feel they are a bit expensive. I mean, with the same points, you can include 10 Amarty Rivers, and they have much better shooting output. Their damage is good, I think, the melee damage of the Sharks, but I'm on the fence about them. I don't think they're a bad unit. I think they're a good unit with good utility. But I think we have better choices if you compare them 1-to-1.
Yeah.
We have better melee choices for allies and better shooting choices. So it's the middle of the ground. So I believe the main attraction for them is the net launcher, which adds a utility.
Yeah, I mean, in Idoneth armies, almost no one takes the net launcher. They take the harpoons for 4 attacks, 3/3s -1 D3. It's like half of what a turtle puts out, and for the points, they're more efficient. And it's 24-inch range, so people really like the sniping ability of these guys.
Yeah.
For Idoneth. So I don't know. I feel like what Sieg was saying is kind of true, that they just don't have exactly the right place. I think flavor-wise, they're really fun, and if you want a fast flying army, then this is a way to kind of bolster that and have some extra options. But I don't know if you're really maxing out your potential with this choice over some other things. So, like Sieg said.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Onto the guard unit. So we have both the Morsar guard and the Ishlane guard. Sieg, we were actually thinking about including an army list into the video. We decided not to do that in the end. But you send over a list with 6 of these guys in, because if I can be so bold, I think you kind of want them to be, or these kind of rules you want on the Dawn Riders, right?
Yeah, for sure. Morsar Guard are a wet dream in terms of what you want from a fast hammer unit. They have everything. A unit of 6 is 360 points. It's not that expensive, and you have 24 wounds on a 4-up save, which is not that flimsy. Their speed is great, 14 inches. They have great bravery. They have +1 with their banner, so it's 8 bravery for 6 models, which makes them self-sufficient on the battle-soak front, and they have +1 to charge, which also helps them reach. They have small cavalry bases, which means they can fly behind enemy screens, or you can hide them inside your castle and have them slingshot and go and delete something. So for me, those are the fast hammer unit we are missing. They act as a delete button. I believe that if you include them in a list, you should aim for the Triumph, the inspiring one, that gives them that may give them +1 to wound, and have them go do a swipe of a unit, because if you use all-out attack and the Triumph, they do about almost 32 damage on a 4-up save unit. If you include their one-time mortal wounds, it's even higher. And I mean, you most likely won't face a 4-up save unit, but even versus a 3-up save unit, it's 24.54 damage, according to AOS StatHammer at least, and that gives us something that we don't have. Go there, delete that, and then they can go and do it again, potentially. Not as good as the first time when you will use all those buffs, but they can almost delete a unit of 10 pink horrors on one charge if you do it right. So I believe there's much value on this unit for Lumineth. It's one of the things we're missing.
Ryan, some bold claims you might want to counter, I guess.
I mean, I put these guys on my list too. My only one thing I would say is I've always been a fan of taking them MSU, so that you can hit multiple fronts. More importantly, the biovoltaic blast is better if the unit you're putting it into has more models than you have. So 3 versus 6 makes a difference with a couple different unit sizes that we might see, most notably 5, a unit of 5 models. But in any case, I can see why Sieg would want to take a unit of 6. They can all receive the all-out attack. They stay alive a little longer. You can rally them back if they aren't in combat for some reason. But I mean, it's a good unit. I just normally suggest people take them in 3s. But if you're playing a lot of screens you're trying to clear, I wouldn't throw the biovoltaic blast into a screen though. I'd save that for a higher priority target, and for to play devil's advocate against myself, a higher priority target like a hero is always going to be less models than what you have anyway, unless it always is going to be less. So then it doesn't make a difference. But I could see doing 6, especially if you're trying to use that +1 to wound Triumph.
Yeah, it's a juicy idea, and it's fun to play as well.
I agree on the point about using small units of 3, but the problem is that the problem we have with all our allied units is that they are messing with our ability to activate 2 units to fight. So the more melee units we include from another army, this effect becomes even greater. So having just 1 unit, I think it's more manageable, so as not to interrupt our activation sequence bonus.
Yeah, I mean, you did mention before that a lot of the units have a hard time getting into combat, and these guys are clearly going to be across the table earlier on. Because like in Idoneth, they're trying to time it with the waves, with the tides, but in Lumineth as allies, you don't care about that. So I'm imagining you're yeeting them up pretty soon, and they're probably dead by the time the rest of your army gets there, because they're not that tanky. They're on a 4-up save, 4 wounds apiece. But I think we're talking 6 in one, half a dozen the other. Where it's a small gripe, and I feel like you could go either way with this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Ryan, you included the next one in your choices as well, the Ishlane Guard, their other variant.
Yeah, it is for obvious reasons. I feel like one of the big things I wanted in my Lumineth builds was better screens. And this unit with functionally a 4-up ethereal save, 3-up if they make a charge, so it can't be modified higher or lower. It means they don't need to absorb one of your all-out defenses. And they're, like you guys have said, they're on. You can make enough of a conga line to get them in to have a nice full screen there. Yeah, they're the same profile as the other guys, except a little weaker on the charge. They're not doing the biovoltaic blast. They're the defensive version of the eels. I think if you're playing a more defensive game, or you really want to one up, or you want to negate that unleash hell, because remember they're going to have a 3-up save from the moment they charge, so they can eat that unleash hell pretty well too if you're trying to send them in. I just think this is a good utility unit. Be good to think about it, and I might be more inclined to say 6s for these guys because they don't have, like, they're just trying to tank, right, at the end of the day. So yeah,
the only reason why I'd be hesitant about including them is because 180 points is a lot for a good screen. Even if it's a good screen, it's just a screen at the end of the day, and you're taking, I mean, two units of 10 harpies, for example, 2 units of 5 harpies, for example.
Yeah, but it's a screen that doesn't necessarily die.
Yeah.
The harpies are going to be dead as soon as they get hit.
Yeah.
That's my point. I mean, think about how long Night Haunt. These are effectively Night Haunt models. So they're on, and they get to actually fly at 14 instead of like 6 or 8 or whatever Night Haunt's doing.
And after having played with a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon that's on an unrendable 3-up save, I have to say it's very strong. It's very strong.
It's functionally skipping the save and going straight to a ward. Yep. That's the way you want to look at ethereal saves, really. Except it doesn't do it against mortal wounds, of course. Mm-hmm. But when these guys go in, I mean, let's say you do have the Sentinel build or a Sentinel build. These guys can tie someone up so that they're not alphaing you for another turn or two before, like, while you're still just peppering shots into what you want to be throwing it into.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They don't have to be a screen. They can also be tying something up across the field, or just going and grabbing objectives, which is 14-inch flying is about as fast as anything gets in the game. Mm-hmm. There are 16-inch, and of course Severeth and her Spirit of the Winds are faster. But anyway. Yeah, I like this unit, but I think Eel's just all-rounder choice. That's why I chose both of them.
Yeah, compared to other screens, this one gives you a little bit more advocacy as well, because you at least get to decide, I'm going to engage that now because I will probably survive that engagement. Whereas with all other screens, you're hoping that they can't circumvent that screen, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This would also have been a huge help against your against certain KO matchups, for example.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Moving on to the Golden Boys, the Stormcast, and we're kicking off with a Celestian Prime. Is he 330? I thought it was 400.
No, he's gone down.
Okay.
That's right. I'll double check it, but yeah.
Yeah. So the Celestian Prime.
I think he was cheaper and he got more expensive, I think.
Oh, really?
In the last, I think.
Okay. I think he was around 325 or 320 before, but yeah, he's at 330 now.
Okay, right. So I lied when I was talking about the Eidolon that was cheaper or much cheaper. It's only 10 points cheaper. But yeah, Celestian Prime, he fills a similar niche, I suppose. He's a bit more tanky. He has a 4-up ward rather than a 5-up ward. He's also much more reliable damage dealer-wise, both from ranged and from close combat. As you might know, as long as you keep him in the sky, so in reserve, for every turn he's in reserve, he gains an extra 2 attacks on his hammer. So those 3 attacks with the asterisks go up by 2 for every turn that you don't deploy him on the battlefield. It's also flat 3 damage. I have to say, playing with a Celestian Prime, as is the case with all Stormcast models, it doesn't really feel like you're missing out on anything big by not having him in the Stormcast book, because all his value is on his War Scroll anyway. Adding this guy on top of Teclis, for example, with a continuous stream of D3 mortal wounds is brutal. Was that also the reason why you included him, Ryan?
I mean, the joke about the Celestian Prime is he's used in every army except Stormcast, partly for the reasons that you said, but also keep in mind Stormcast's allegiance abilities aren't that big of a deal anyway. He's just such a flexible piece. If you're going for the mortal wounds thing, you put him on the table immediately so that you can use him. Saving up, you used to be able to put him in the sky for longer before the reserve rule kicked in, because his rule was different in 2nd edition or whatever, the way it worked. So you can't get him on any more than 7 attacks, and that's if you bring him in on turn 3, and that's giving up 2 turns worth of that shooting radius, which I think you probably want. I mean, he's like you said, he's tanky. He's got 8 wounds, so he's got less than the Eidolon, but a better save. So it's 50% better on the wounds he does have for that 4 upward versus a 5. Yeah, it's just and keep in mind he also gets to have a guaranteed charge every single turn.
Yeah,
He
that's true.
so like if you bring him in from out of nowhere, he gets for a fact he's destiny dicing himself into combat basically.
Yeah.
And so for a fact he's going to get in there and tie someone up, and that could be all you need to make sure that whatever alpha they were going to do is going to be delayed by a turn. Now, whether it's worth 330 points is for you to decide, but I just think this unit has so much flexibility. And like we've been talking about in general, he's fast at 12 inches. So, and then guaranteed charge. So you can think of it like he's 24 inches. All you have to do is be within charge range, and then he gets a guaranteed charge. So he's flying straight across the table. So
That's a good point. Yeah. Siegfried, you as an advocate for the Eidolon, why would you choose the Eidolon over the Prime?
Well, first of all, I believe that the optimum way to use the Prime, if you want to use him as a fighter, is to drop him on the second turn, because then you get to, if he fights like in every battle round, he has 5 attacks. For 4 battle rounds, that's 20 attacks all in all. So if you make him go down on a 3rd battle round, yes, it is 7 attacks, but is only for 3 battle rounds, so that is 21 attacks. So the difference is not that great. It's really 1 attack most of the time, and you will get to use him from the 2nd battle round, use his mortal wound damage from his scepter. So I believe that's the optimum way to play him. But even with this, his damage is lower than his damage output is lower than the Eidolon, and he's tough. But imagine he has 3 up save, the Eidolon has 3 up save too, and with a 4 up ward it's like he has 16 wounds, and the Eidolon is like it has 18 wounds. So the difference is not that great. But if you go, for maximum point for point defense and offense, the Eidolon is better. And also I value very, very much the retreat and charge and the auto heal. He will go down, I believe, faster than the Eidolon. But on the other hand, his auto charge deep strike can potentially win you the game. So on its own, if played properly.
Yeah, and I mean, the power from his scepter, the range attack cannot be underestimated, because if you're putting on D3 mortal wounds from Teclis, or potentially even D6, and I'm piling on another D3, and I'm maybe shooting with your sentinels when the season from this GSB is over, that is killing a lot of heroes just straight out of the gate. If you're going for that hero sniping potential, though, we have different allies for that, I guess. Did you want to add anything, Zeke?
Oh no, I just want to add that you can also use the Rune of Petrification on top of all these. But I will never use him and Teclis on the same list. It's too much points.
Yeah.
But you can stack up on the Mortal Wound AoE damage for sure with him.
I think that brings us to our next hero. Oh no, of course we have the big boy. Now this might surprise a lot of people, because even in our Discord there's been a lot of discussion about whether you're right to include this guy Siegfried. This is one that you've been advocating for quite a long time now. Since our new book came out, I guess. Mainly because of his ability to add plus one to casts, but also because he does a lot of different things. Maybe you should take the lead on this one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, he's my most favorite ally option at the moment for Lumineth. I think he has the most to offer. I mean, he's not cheap with 400 points, But imagine you get a better shooting profile than Sylvaneth, and Sylvaneth, since he can actually do the shooting phase movement in the enemy's turn, it's really a mobile shooting platform in reality. So even with the reduced points of Sylvaneth, I think he's 300 points now. He got a reduction of 20 points. You get with 100 points a better shooting profile, and I will explain why. The Dregsworn Templar has 4 attacks with 30 inches range, on a 3-up, 2-up, -3 rend, 2 damage. So Sylvaneth has 4 attacks on a 2-up, 3-up, -3 rend, D3 damage. So 2 damage is better than D3. Fight me on this. I think it's always better to have the reliability than swing those D3 dice and have them fail you in a crucial moment. And also the fact that it's on 3-up on to hit and 2-up on to wound, you can buff him quite easily with an all-out attack, while Sylvaneth will need to either use a Triumph or Best Day Ever in order to get the 2-up profile. And on top of that, he also has a bow, which it's not that great. It's 2 attacks with 24 inches range, 3-up, -1 rend, 1 damage. But it also does mortal wound on a 6-up. So all this adds to a much more robust shooting profile. So you get the shooting of Sylvaneth, you get an 18 wounds monster. Yes, the 4-up save is a negative, but let's not forget that all our allies can benefit from protection of his. And this is something that we can take advantage of and have him be more tanky. Other than that, he's a monster. He can do a roar when we need it. His bite attacks have great utility, because imagine you charging him on pink horror unit. So he eats 1 pink horror on a 2-up, so you roll 3 dice, you will eat 3 pink horrors, and because they didn't die from wounds or mortal wounds, they don't get to split. So you roll 3 dice, and on a 2-up, you have done 15 wounds of damage worth without him having fought yet, really. And he can also break coherency. He can eat a champion, a banner. It has great utility in my opinion. And then we go to one of the main reasons to include him, especially if you play in Zytrek. He gives a passive +1 to cast on an 80 inches bubble, which is a huge range. Whenever I use him, it's really all of my army until he dies for the whole duration of the battle. And that, if you use him in Zytrek, +2 to cast makes our casting much more reliable. Every spell that is on a 6-up is on a 4-up, which is almost auto cast. All our difficult spells that need an 8 to cast become on a 6 before any rerolls you use or other chords. And it also makes us able to use Total Eclipse without having to use Teclis or Deep Thinkers, because it makes the 9 casting value on a 7 in reality, so it makes it much more easier to cast it. And on the plus side, he also gives a -1 to cast on enemy wizards within 18 inches. So especially if you use him in conjunction with the Runo Senthoi combo of Lumineth, which can potentially give you 3 unbinds with +4, 2 of them of which will have the reroll.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can make it like even better than +5 to unbind.
Yeah,
So
that's brutal.
yes, so I believe you get what Sevreth gives you at the moment. You get +1 to cast, which we don't have many ways. We have Zytrek and Teclis, and that's that.
That's it, yeah.
And you can have magic and him, and if he dies, you don't lose your magic. Or if your magic dies, you don't lose your shooting. So you can send him and fight without having to worry that you have lost your most valuable piece in the army.
Yeah, I love how you approach this guy and what he does for our army. And as you mentioned, he has a lot of things. I don't think he's a huge outlier in any of those aspects, but he does everything very well. And eating sergeants or command models or just breaking coherency with it, as you mentioned, is super impactful. The first tournament I did with Ryan. I actually did a video on this as well. One of the players there, Lawrence, he brought a Stormcast list with this guy in it, and breaking coherency with that bite attack is massive. It can be really hard to play against that. So that's very cool.
That's a good segue into my reaction, which is I can almost guarantee you that Lawrence wasn't using the Dragsworn Templar, but was using the far superior Lord Celestant on Stardrake version because he has a 3-up save. They're basically the same thing, except for the save and the other guy punches a little bit harder and has better buffs than Stormcast. But the thing that's blowing my mind is that anyone's going to bat for this guy because in Sieg, you made really good argument. Obviously, the other guy doesn't fit into the allies' points because he's I think he might be cheaper than 500 now, but he was 500. He's at least 500 or in that neighborhood. They keep changing the points on these things. But no one ever goes to bat for this dude because a 4-up save is so inferior to a 3-up save. But like you were saying, Teclis is, well, not twice this many points, but nearing it. And he's on 16 wounds on a 4-up save for a monster on a bigger base, but maybe that's not always a good thing. Also giving the +1 to cast. You're right that the shooting attack's pretty good on this guy. I've used him. I have an all dragons list. Did we? No, I didn't play it with you, Jonas. But I call it Ryan Air. It's got that's Stardrake, the self-confined version of this with some dragons and some stuff.
I love it already.
An all flying Stormcast list that's not all dragons. But anyway, I do think there's a lot of utility in this guy, and you're making some points there, Sieg. So. Yeah, at the risk of going on too long about this, I'll just cut it off and say I'm intrigued. I think it's cool that someone found a way to work this in a way that works.
Right?
So.
I thought that too. I was like, damn, see, that is such an original way to include him, and the way he approached it, I love it. It's cool. Yeah.
And something I forgot to include, his the Stormlance of the Rider. It's only 3 attacks and 3-up, -1 and 1 damage, but versus a monster. If you roll a 6 onto hit, it does D6 mortal wounds. And I don't think that this is actually very great, very good, but it is threatening. Mm-hmm. And if your opponent has an important monster hero, he will think twice before engaging the Dragsworn Templar, because if you get lucky, will he take the chance? Because a couple of lucky rolls and he may suffer great damage. So this also acts as a deterrent, because this guy is not meant to duel other monsters. He's meant to fight infantry units mostly. Yeah.
I just wish his model was cooler, and I know that's a weird thing to say because maybe some of you or maybe both of you feel like this is such a very cool model, but I've always felt very strange looking at this model because anatomically it just looks so weird. His right paw both of his paws are super weird. His front paws and his wings are in a strange place. I don't know. There's all kinds of wrong with him. It looks weird.
I like him.
Do you as well, Sieg?
Yes. Oh, his front foot is bent in a really weird way.
Yeah.
But I tried to make a conversion of him and change the wings to make him more threatening.
Yeah. Yeah, I might actually try to use a phoenix to make something that comes close to him, because they're on the same base size, right? Or is his base even bigger?
The ironclad and like black coat.
Oh, okay, no, that's not the same base size. Okay, let's move on because we're going way past our time limit here. Okay, so Ryan, we mentioned something cheaper than Tree Revenants and also something better in a Galician champion-centric book, and that's the Knight Zephyros, or Neve Black Talon, as she's pictured here. You take this one because you bring this one in your worlds list.
Yeah, I am a huge champion for this Galician champion. I think this is one of the best 100 points allies choices in all of Order, because every single turn this unit can teleport, including out of combat as a retreat, and just outside of 9 anywhere on the table. It counts as a Galician champion as long as it's the Knight Zephyros, not Neve. It does have run and shoot, but who cares? It's really just used for getting those battle tactics that a lot of armies have a hard time with. And I can tell you in the Lumineth Castle, you can teleport the Cathalar if you need to, and then teleport this as well to get those hard to get 2 GCs required battle tactics that so many armies struggle with getting. You can screen out people from getting behind you because you know that this thing can teleport at any moment. So if you need to advance your castle up and you're worried about them teleporting some unit to your rear flank, you just leave this so that 9 inches outside of this is pretty hard to land. And then you just teleport it when you need to. Also, it's GC, of course, so if it's anywhere near your battle line, it can't be shot. Not that you really need to worry about that. The big thing I've got to worry about in my list is not letting it get near the Rune of Petrification, because it does get hit by that, unlike the rest of my army, which goes for everything else we've included in this video. But I can't say enough good things about this unit, especially for 100 points. Yeah, it's only 5 wounds, but it's on a 3-up save, and in this season at least, being a GC is just too good to pass up, I think.
Yeah, I love her for the cunning maneuver, battle tactic, for all the battle tactics actually. I think once this GHB is over, she will lose some value, maybe even enough to be replaced again by 3 revs. But I use her as an ally in my IDK list when I played you, and I actually managed to pull some cool trickery off with the cunning maneuver and her teleport, and it just felt so good. And I think having that teleport, just as a precaution, right, or as a backup plan, or as a threat to your opponent, as you mentioned, they always have to screen. Just think about playing against Soulblight Gravelords, and you always have to keep in mind, okay, from that graveyard, something's going to appear, and I have to block it, or from that Gnawhole against that Skaven player. And with the Knight Zephyros, you always have that threat of an easy battle tactic.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really convinced me, at least for this season, for sure. She's very cool.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I was so happy that you included this one, Ryan, because this is my topic for this season specifically, because he is so cool, and I saw him in a Sylvaneth list. I'm not sure whether you've seen it, Ryan. It's one of the lists that went 5-0 for Sylvaneth in a recent tournament.
No, I didn't notice. No.
Did you, Sieg?
No.
Okay, so let me tell you what happened. So I'm super excited if you hadn't noticed. I was actually almost that excited that I was going to make a video about that guy's list. I actually want to name him, and I know I saved his comment on Facebook because he was explaining to me how this list worked. But I'll get back to that maybe in the comments. So he brought the Warsong Bomb and 3 Knight Vexillor for just a plethora of mortal wounds that were very reliable. And you can actually do the same thing, and even worse, with Techless. If you're bringing 3 of these guys with Techless, or maybe even if in a Seraphon list, if you're playing Croak and 3 of these guys, That is brutal. That is really, really brutal. And on top of that, he can teleport a Stormcast unit once per game, and he is a Stormcast unit, so he could potentially...
Don't get too far ahead of yourself. You have to choose between the mortal wounds or the teleport.
Oh, right, that's true. Yep.
Yeah,
That's true. Okay,
Yeah.
that does lose some. That does lose some value, I guess. I had not picked up on that. Yeah, I forgot about that. But anyway, still, the mortal wounds annihilation is still real. You can ask yourself, is it worth 360 points? Probably not. But still, it's it's so cool. I just really hate the model. But it's so cool.
You could always use the one with the better banner.
Yeah.
Cooler about it. Okay. So I did put him on my list too, right? And so I'm about to rain on your parade a little bit more, even though I am a supporter for this guy. But if you take 3 of them with the coalition rules or the allies rules, you're going to need 9 Lumineth units to make it up. Which, fair. And I don't know if you're going to pull that off in Lumineth.
Yeah.
You can afford it, but with how expensive your units are, you're going to be really struggling to get it up there. I could see if maybe you were trying to do like the Synthoi bomb thing that Sieg was talking about, where you're taking some cheaper, Scenari heroes or something, and you're just taking a bunch of them. You might get your drops up to 12 in total. Could be doable, but you might be bending over backwards. As someone who's bent over backwards to make allies work, I totally understand it, but sometimes you end up sacrificing actual synergy just to fit something in rules-wise. I could see 2 definitely.
You're totally right. With Deckless, it's impossible to reach that amount of Lumineth units.
You're gonna
That's
have to
a bummer. I was so hyped.
Yeah. Sorry to shit on it. But I actually, for what it's worth, first off, I've written a number of lists in cities, in Stormcast, and in as allies with these guys doing a shit ton of bombs. So I'm a big fan. I'm also a big fan of that once per game teleport. A lot of people, you're functionally getting another Tunnel Master as long as it's a one of these guys. And let's say, okay, he's 120 points. That leaves you with 280 points worth for one other Stormcast unit. If you had something that you really wanted to take as an ally and then teleported at one point in the game, I could see that being a thing too. So it's not the worst ability, but I don't think it pays off quite as much as the Mortal Wound spam does. And a 6-inch bubble is double what the Celestant Prime is doing. That said, isn't it on a 4-up? It's not auto, right?
I think it's auto.
Let me
because
double
usually
check.
I include the rolls if there's a rule that you need to make.
You're right, it is auto. It must be the Knight Judicator that's on a 4-up.
Yeah.
The Knight Judicator has an ability. One of the Storm.
Yes.
But anyway, I'm a big fan, and he's a GC and a 3-up save. So, and he's a totem, so he's doing commands at 18 inches, which is nice. So
and taking 2 with Deckless is D3 mortal wounds to a lot of units.
It is 24-inch range, so you got to walk up a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Love it. Very cool. Okay, I think that covers all the heroes. Yeah, we're on to troops. Ryan, you included the Stormstrike Chariot, which is fun because I've been considering using this because I still have the White Lines of Grace Chariots lying around here from my High Elf days, and there's really nothing that I can use it for in the Lumineth roster. It's just 170 points. Seems a little bit expensive, but then on the other hand, the impact hits are kind of juicy as well. So why don't you tell us why you chose this one?
Well, I mean, compare it with the Shark. Okay, the Shark is also 170 points, 8 wounds on a 4-up save versus this has 12 wounds on a 3+ save.
Yeah.
And it's on that big old base, which means you can use it as a screen. You can use it as that for the charge if they get close enough, but they don't actually come in for your screen. I mean, that's a big ass base, and that's a lot of wounds. Like if they don't have rend, we're talking about a wounds absorption of 36. They have to get 36 things through the to hit and wound stage with no rend in order to take one of these things down. So to me, that's actually pretty good value for 170. Even if it didn't do any damage. But it depends on how you're playing and what your build is. There are certain people that run 6 of these in the list. Not a Lumineth list, obviously, but But I would actually suggest, it's too bad you can't reinforce it to make it 2, to just have a giant screen. But they're single, so you have to take them as separate. But I could totally see doing 2. It fits into your allies allocation at 340 points. So I don't know if it's the best choice, but it's definitely, I was looking at a lot of screens options, and this one is a screen that can actually hit back if it needs to. So
Yeah, I played against the Chariot when I played against Paul with his full Dragon's List back in the day, a couple of years ago by now, 2 years probably. So literally a couple. And he actually cleared 20 Sentinels with this.
Sure.
I mean, sure, they didn't have some metal weapons on their daggers back then, but it wasn't a hard fight for him. -1 to hit after a charge is very good against Unleash Hell. And then, as you mentioned, the 3-up save is pretty good. You clear out some archers, you kill some more with Battle Shock. Yeah, cool. Very nice. Okay, on to our next one, the Annihilators. Now, I have to say, Ryan, this one surprised me a little bit. So sell me on these guys. I can already see where we're going with this. But, do the Siegfried promotion-esque thing.
I mean, it's the same idea. I was with Stormcast units. I was very much favoring units that you could reinforce, so you could take double of. So we're talking about 360 points for 6 models. Each of them has 3 wounds on a 2-up base save. So if you do an all-out defense, we're at 2-up ignoring Ren 1, which is they're going to stick around for a while. And you just use them as a screen. Keep in mind, I'm playing Lumineth right now as a castle build. I'm not trying to go up and mess people up. As much as I'm trying to survive and keep my castle alive. I actually really like this unit for just sticking around. Even one unit of them is still a pretty wide, you can spread them out just enough and they hit back too. They're better on the charge, but they're still they're tanking a whole lot. And keep in mind the difference between a 3-up save and a 2-up save is double the amount of wounds absorption. So generally speaking, you take your wounds characteristic and multiply it by 6. So a unit of 3 of these at 9 times 6 is 54 points of wounds absorption that they each are having with no rend. If it's rend -1, then it's 3 times, so 27. It's still a whole lot of wounds absorption. 2+ save goes a really long way. So maybe, again, it's not the absolute best usage of the points, but I was picking Stormcast units that I thought could do this screening and not just die. I know you can put some cheap chaff or something in front, but that only lasts for 1 turn. They get a double turn, it's over. This is going to last for a second, especially if you reinforce them. And we were talking about reinforcing other things too. So it's an option. I'm not saying it's the best, but I actually think they might function better in an army that needs screens, good durable screens, like Lumineth, than they do in Stormcast itself. I would take the other Annihilator Stormcast.
I would love this unit much more if they were allowed to teleport.
Well, what would you do with them after they teleport?
I mean, it's the same thing, but then they would almost be like Tree Revenants, right? But just way more tanky.
Yeah, the problem is they really are better on the charge, and what the Stormcast is getting to do is if they drop from Scions of the Storm rule, so 1/2 of the armies get to use this, and you have a Lord Imperatant in your army, they are coming in outside of 7, and when they drop, they're re-rolling that charge. Yeah. So that's the equivalent of roughly a 2+ on a D6 in terms of likelihood, and then they do a bunch of mortal wounds when they charge. So, I feel like that you really need, if they're going to teleport and you want them to actually get into combat, otherwise people are just going to ignore them, I think. But they really need to re-roll, and they coming in at 7 is awesome. But you can't do that outside of Stormcast.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, my only counterpoint will be that as a screen, they're just 3 models, so they don't have that much of a coverage. So it may be easier for the opponent to just go around them, easier than compared with other units. But I agree their durability is great, and let's not forget they benefit from protection of his too, so they can have 5 ward.
Yeah, especially if you're doing that castle build.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
I didn't think about it.
I think the next one is the last one. I'm not actually sure, but Protectors was also some unit from you, Ryan, and I think for mostly the same reason as the previous one.
Yeah, they're just more models, so they can get up to a 2+ pretty easily as long as you keep the spears to like maces ratio right. So they're on a. It's still functionally a 3-up, but it's you can keep save stacking and it's functionally the same as a 2-up if you do it right. And they do a good bit more damage than the Annihilators if they're in a defensive setting, because you're multiplying by 5, and the maces can do some mortal wounds. And they have 3-inch range, so you could even put a cheap chaff screen in front of them if you had it in another. Or you could. I don't know. There's not from our list of allies. We're not really talking about a whole lot here, but they could still reach, and you could have two ranks of what's it called? Good screens. Problem is they're 220 points, so you're not getting 2 of these. They'd have to be 200 points or less to get 2 iterations and still be under 400 points or at 400 or less. So that's one of the trade-offs here. But Protectors are a great unit. They're slow at 4 inches, but again, I was thinking about castle builds. So, yeah, it's a thought.
Yeah, cool.
You can use them together with 3 Annihilators. 180 points, 220.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Want to use 2 units, you can do it like this and have one of each.
Yeah, and that's a screen that no one's getting through for a while.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, we're 1 hour and a half way through the video now, so it's time that we get to the conclusion. So obviously, guys, feel free to add something here, but what I really wanted to conclude on was that allies, as we mentioned, they fill the gap in a lacking LRL roster. Even if you would not agree that it's lacking, it's at least filling certain gaps that were not filled before. The thing that we're mostly looking for here in our allies options is either high rend attacks, or I would say very damagey fast attacks, as Siegfried mentioned, for example, the Morrsar Guard, or either high volume range damage like the archers from IDK, and then a lot of teleports. As you mentioned, as you've noticed by now, most of our ally options are actually tied to movement stuff. So that is very interesting to me, and something that kind of shows that Lumineth tends to love their castling, their slower builds, and that's something that you want to balance out, or might want to balance out with ally options. Usefulness of these top picks may vary depending on GHB changes. Obviously, we could add some units probably with a new GHB. You never know what direction Games Workshop is going to go with the new General's Handbook. But for now, I think we've covered a lot of bases here. Is there anything else you guys want to add?
See?
Oh, okay. Well, I have played various armies, order only, in AOS. And Lumineth, while they are by far my most favorite faction, it's the only faction that I'm always finding myself pondering using allies. And I think that that means something. It feels that Lumineth really need the variety that the allies offer, because we are lacking it in terms of our own War Scroll roster. So that is, I mean, I agree with all the points Jonas made regarding the reasons why we use allies and need allies specifically for the roles Lumineth need. So I think that is certainly a thing that Lumineth players must consider, competitive-wise, for sure.
Yeah, Ryan?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think about allies in a lot of situations because I'm always looking for ways to kind of get a list to do some things it doesn't usually get to do. And I guess that is an indication of the book, but where it sits. But as a cities player who gets to use all of the allegiance abilities for my Stormcast allies and some of my other coalition, I'm even more excited about this opportunity. So hopefully we'll get to talk more about things progress, and we'll keep reinventing this list as the seasons change and the other books for these 4 potential armies, or maybe more one day, keep changing. So this is fun.
I fully expect them to add Umbraneth if they're not faced off against each other. I could see them being paired as another ally choice. But yeah, I really hope we've given you guys some inspiration, more than just simple, this is the best pick and go with it. We include some suboptimal choices compared to maybe the most optimal choices here. Please do let us know in the comments which ally is your favorite. Maybe it was one of these, if it was one of the units from our list, or it might not be, and then I'm especially intrigued. We hope you'll enjoy the video. Please give a like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to join the Discord, if you want to see the lists that Siegfried has made with his allies, or if you just want to know about allies in general, you can find Siegfried and Ryan and myself in our Discord chat. So please join us in the Discord there. And we'll see you in the next one. Ryan, Siegfried, thank you for joining me. And yeah, bye-bye.